Hello everyone. We would like to start again, and now we have session 4 on the permanent withdrawals from the market. Colleagues, I would ask you to please take your seats because we are already 5 minutes behind schedule. Now, for session 4, it is my pleasure to welcome Momir Radulovic. He is the Executive Director of the Agency for Medicinal Products and Medical Devices in Slovenia. He is also an EMA Management Board member, and he is also Heads of Medicines Management Group member, the AGMA Group. So, Momir, it's a pleasure to welcome you as the moderator for today's session on permanent withdrawals from the market, and I give you now the floor.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Hughes, for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session on the withdrawals. So I would like to wish a good afternoon to all the colleagues, and I would like to welcome you to session 4, which will be focused on permanent withdrawals from the market. And for all others who joined only in this session, I would also like to welcome you to the joint meeting of the HMA, EMA multi-stakeholder workshop on the shortages. And if I can ask the team to put the slide, just some introductory slide. So as said, my name is Momir Radulovic, and I'm heading the Slovenian Medicines and Medical Device Agency. And this session will be split in 3 parts. So first, we will have flash statements by different stakeholders, from the patients, from the healthcare professionals, from industry, from payers, and from national competent authorities. And then we'll go to present what are the network priorities to 2025. And the third part of our session will be discussion. So we will spend time on questions and answers. And first, I would just like to frame the session. So what is the scope of today's session? So we all know that permanent withdrawals from the market, so discontinuation is an issue for us, so this needs to be differentiated from the shortages market. So that means that we have unavailability issues both of innovative and old medicines, and especially well-established medicines. So why could withdrawals present an issue? So as we know, it's not all about the mathematical net effect. So sometimes a medicinal product being withdrawn has already a well-established pool of patients and patients on treatment which are following some treatment recommendation, and while a newcomer potential has none. So switching sometimes is troublesome, and this is something that we will relate today. And we discussed already the root causes, so I won't go in detail, but mostly they are to the commercial or business considerations. And we have various, let's say, influencers that this decision is made. So we have small market sizes. Sometimes it's a pricing and reimbursement issue. Sometimes it's a tendering, because we have just one tender winner, and sometimes we also dealing with the reduced manufacturing capacity. If you move to the next slide, please. So what is the scope of today's discussion? So this is, we're not going to discuss temporary withdrawals. We're not going to discuss quality, safety, efficacy reasons linked to the benefit risk assessment, and we're not going to also discuss the accessibility issues. Our session objective is actually to listen to each stakeholder group feedback and to raise awareness on the topic, and of course to identify what are the key topics for future action. And we would definitely like to inform you and refine HMA EMA task force program on the topic. And if I may now go to our first part of the session. So first, just maybe to remind you on the housekeeping rules, your microphones will be muted during the presentations, and but you're already invited to signal during the presentations in the chat what are your questions to the speaker, and then we will address this later during the discussion. So we shall now begin with the topic, with the presenters from the different stakeholders, and I would like to invite first to the podium Charlotte Rofianen from the European Public Health Alliance member, and Charlotte works as a European Policy Advisor at Français Assos Santé, and she's also a representative of Patients and Consumer Working Party at the EMA. Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mamir. Thanks for the presentation, and thanks a lot for the invitation to present patient perspective on this important topic. Next slide, please. So we have just a few minutes in order to introduce the topic. So I try to be short and just highlight the main issues. So Mamir, you mentioned the first one, which is that withdrawals, commercial withdrawals and withdrawals in general are not considered as shortages. So what is the direct consequence? The direct consequence is that in many countries, and France is the first one, there is just no information on withdrawals. Even if, obviously, as we will see, they can have a huge impact on patients, especially when there are a few producers of one medicines and no or limited alternatives. And so practices are very different from one country to the other. So France, no mention on the list of medicines which are in short supply, and no mention in the website of the medicine agency, except when it was preceded by supply issues, so by shortages. Good practice in Italy, on the contrary, where all withdrawals are published on the same list, which is extremely important, especially if we want to be patient-centric, because even if the reasons for the absence of the medicine on the market are different, the impact on patient is not different. Second point. So these withdrawals can have very different impact on patients according to the market situation and according to what kind of medicine we are talking about. In some cases, there is a withdrawal with no adequate alternative, or there is a withdrawal with just one or two producers of one medicine. I will just give you two examples, because withdrawals, we usually think about the fact that these medicines are not, so they're too cheap, they cost too much to produce, so company just doesn't see any economic interest to continue the production. It can happen. Actually, there are withdrawals of all drugs, which is the most common situation, but we'll see we also have withdrawals of innovative medicines, which is something rather new, but which could develop in future and which is another issue. So one example that you may already know about, which are medicines indicated in bladder cancer, mitomycin C, and intravesical BCG. So in a few years, unfortunately, those two medicines were removed from the French market by the French producers. And there wasn't enough production in other countries in order to supply the French market. So there has been tentative to import the medicines, to find other producers, but still for a very long period, what happened is that we have had an increase of bladder ablations, which is obviously has a huge impact on patient health and well-being. And we have had intermittent shortages for many, many years now. The other example about new drug, ibalizumab, which is indicated in multi-drug resistant HIV. So the market authorization holder recently asked the EMA to withdraw its European market authorization. And there is no alternative available. And why? Why this decision? So the drug was already available on a few European markets. And for instance, in France, discussions were open with the Ministry of Health in order to set the price. But the market authorization holder was not happy with how discussions were going. And so it just decided to remove the drug from the whole European market. So with huge impact on patients, obviously, including in France, because it was already available through an early access program. So what we are expecting from the revision of the pharma legislation on this topic, so longer notification times, 12 months are a minimum. 12 months in advance. Just to give you an example, so there is currently a removal of an antibiotic based on josamicin. That's an old antibiotic, which has been used as an equivalent of amoxicillin, especially in this shortage period. And they have been very compliant because they announced it to the institutions 2 years in advance. And still, there is a situation of shortage right now. They had planned for a longer time because of the shortage situation. So we need to take into account also the situation of other medicines which are in the same therapeutic class. And notification time gives you the possibility to try to find an alternative solution, so to try to find another producer interested to take over the production. Publication of withdrawals as soon as they are notified. I already mentioned it, and facilitation of the transfer of the drug to another producer, because especially for medicines of high therapeutic interest, every time a drug is taken out of the market, it can have an impact, and there can be other companies interested to take over the production. So we all need collectively to do everything we can, and especially industry in collaboration with Medicines Agency, in order to find a solution and to make sure that every time that's possible, drugs remain on the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Charlotte, for giving us this patient perspective. And I would just like to move forward. And I'm a timekeeper as well, so I would like also to ask all stakeholders to be within the 3 to 5 minutes, because I would really like to spend more time on the discussion. So I'll now pass to the second stakeholder. These are the healthcare professionals. I would like to introduce Mary McCarthy. She represents European Union of General Practitioners and is also an alternate member of EMA Healthcare Professionals Working Party. And Mary, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mamaya. Yes, this is another example of good communication and what words actually mean. The problem is, in general practice, withdrawal does not mean the withdrawal of drugs from authorization. In general practice, withdrawal means either that you're having symptoms because you're addicted to an opiate or a benzodiazepine, and that when the drug is gradually reduced, you get withdrawal symptoms. Alternatively, it can also mean the withdrawal of drugs from an elderly patient. A lot of our elderly patients are taking 15 different kinds of medication. And when they're in their 80s or 90s, you begin to wonder whether a statin really is appropriate at that stage, because you're trying to prevent a future event that might occur in 20 or 30 years' time, which for a 90-year-old is not really a reasonable reason for prescribing it. So we need to be clear about what we're talking about, because if you start talking to general practitioners about withdrawal, they don't think about drugs that are no longer authorized. They think about removing drugs from patients, deprescribing. We thoroughly approve of the withdrawal of drugs from the market because of changes in the risk-benefit profile. This seems to me to be entirely sensible and in line with good medical practice. We have no quarrel with withdrawal on those terms. We find, in general, in all countries within Europe and outside, the main cause of shortage within primary care is because of supply issues. It's not because of withdrawals. And these are either local or can be national problems. For instance, in the recent shortage of antibiotics, in the UK, it was shortage of pediatric formulations. That is, of liquid versions of amoxicillin, say. And children were having to take capsules. The formulations that were available were reserved for children under 5. It's very difficult to persuade a 6 or 7-year-old to swallow a capsule. What we would like in regard to shortages is, as everyone has said all along, advance notice. The longer notice we have that something is going to be in short supply, the better able we are to try and mitigate those circumstances or to get alternative drugs into the pipeline. The guidance on alternatives would also be helpful. We don't want to be told beta blockers are in short supply, but ACE inhibitors are plentiful. We want to be told atenolol is in short supply, but there is a lot of ramipril around, so that we have specific information on the alternative drug that is actually around, available, and within community pharmacies. We don't want a broad blanket advice. We want specific advice for a particular locality. No, in your community pharmacy, you can get ramipril, although you won't be able to get atenolol for the next 3 weeks. And that would be really helpful. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you, Mary, also for pointing out this healthcare professional perspective, and it's perfectly understood that withdrawal for you means something else, but we today are discussing this societal perspective, and what is actually what could be the policy impact of the withdrawals. And if I move to the next speaker, I would like to present Adrian Mandelhoven. So he is Director General and representing on the behalf of the industry. And Director General of Medicines for Europe. So generic represents usually 70% of the primary cares, and definitely are one of the important stakeholders here. So Adrian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Momir, and thank you to EMA for inviting me here today. So I'm actually speaking here on behalf of the whole industry, but as I am representing generic manufacturers myself, I'll put a little bit more of an emphasis on that, but I just want to clarify that we're speaking here together as one industry. So I think as Momir has pointed out, member states acknowledge that the majority of withdrawals are for commercial regions. This is also documented in the Technopolis study on medicine shortages. I think what's perhaps novel or new is that recently exogenous factors have also impacted withdrawals. So not just commercial reasons. So for example, the introduction of the Falsified Medicines Directive, not because of the system, the IT system, but the changes that were required to manufacturing lines, for example, or the Brexit, which impacted certain markets like Northern Ireland, or certain clawback policies like in Romania or in France. These exogenous factors have come into play and have started to increase the number of withdrawals. So I think some of the questions: how can member state and authorities and industry cooperate to prevent withdrawals so as to ensure better availability and reduce the risk of shortages, of course. So I think, the economic realities in Europe, where we have capped pricing, so fixed pricing set by governments, this is not conducive to an environment where cost inflation is going up due to inflation, first of all, but also due to increasing costs, for example, of manufacturing, cost of goods, et cetera, which are driven by different exogenous factors. I think it's very clear that in Europe, we're at a kind of crossroads, at least when it comes to the off-patent market, because you have capped pricing and other measures such as tendering, which really are designed to reduce the price. Just as an example, the prices in Germany have been reduced by 66% over the last 10 years for the off-patent sector. So it shows you this is not small reductions in prices that we're discussing. And of course, what this means for supply is you have withdrawals, so you have fewer companies supplying the market, and this increases the risk, of course, of a shortage because you have fewer companies who are able to react if there's a manufacturing issue or something else, and this can lead to reduced patient access. Now, I don't want to be completely negative because there are also solutions. For example, we worked a lot with the Commission to solve the issue related to Brexit, to try and avoid withdrawals from Northern Ireland, but also impacting to a certain extent Ireland, Malta, and Cyprus with certain flexibilities. This may change again because the Commission has just negotiated a new agreement with the UK, but at least the old agreement was very helpful. There's also changes, for example, in Germany, they're trying to change the generic, the off-patent medicines law, if you wish, which basically aims at increasing prices of critical medicines, but also, and this is the interesting point I think here, is there's a proposal to include the National Regulatory Agency, the BfArM, in some of the activities. So where the BfArM would detect that there are too few suppliers on the German market, they could take action with the payers to modify the market structure to attract more players on the market. There are other discussions. I mean, the Commission has just published a very interesting study on medicines procurement, showing that medicines procurement is part of the problem because it's mainly based on single winner tenders without security of supply criteria generally in Europe. And so they advise in this multi-winner tenders criteria other than price, like security of supply, for example, to encourage more suppliers on the market. And if this could be transformed into something more substantial, like a guidance to member states, this could be very helpful. I think a key question is, everyone knows in the draft legislation, will earlier notification of withdrawals have an impact? I think for patients and doctors, for example, this will be good because they will have more information to know about alternatives and this kind of thing, but it probably won't lead to fewer withdrawals. I think the main reason for this is, at least for off-patent drugs, usually you withdraw after you have no more market share. So really you're not supplying the market anymore. And so likely you're not manufacturing very much anymore. Also, there are competition law issues associated with this. There was a famous case called the Aspen case, where there's a certain rule, if you wish, that you cannot threaten a withdrawal to seek a price increase. So this could be anti-competitive if you would even not threaten, but let's say offer a thing. So this is something to be taken into consideration. And so these things I think are important. So I think really what's important here is I think we need to look at the markets in Europe, both the procurement markets, but also the regulated pricing markets. There are good examples outside of Europe, from Australia, from Canada, on how they have solved this. In Canada, they have a monitoring of the market. When there are too few suppliers, the price changes, the price goes up. When there are too many suppliers, the prices go down. So this is, a very novel and creative way to solve this kind of thing. And I think in Europe, practically speaking, we need to think about this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian, and thank you for all the related issues you put on a very busy slide, but as said, there are a lot of exogenous factors, and on one side, we are aware of drug shortages. We know this is not a new issue. It's been on the previous 10 years we're dealing with the drug shortages, but as you've seen during these 2 days, it's high on the agenda in a lot of different organizations, which is really good. And now I will move to the payer perspective, or the buyer perspective, and I would like to introduce Michael Ermisch. He's a specialist for medicinal products at the the National Association of Statutory Health Insurance Funds from Germany. And Michael, the floor is yours to present your flash statement.
Thank you very much. Since this flash statement, please proceed to the second and only one slide. And although we agreed that safety reasons are not in the center of what we're discussing here, I displayed them as a category one needs to take into account simply to show also the differences and also to, well, at least make this decision more unsure that it doesn't really, that it's almost every time acceptable for everyone to withdraw medicine from the market due to safety reasons, because we've seen in the past examples where, at least in Germany, there were intense discussions whether the European-wide decision was appropriate due to how the drug was used in the German market. And so there might also be acceptance problems when safety reasons are the reason for withdrawal in the end. But there's one thing that's really better than, on the other hand, that we have a quite transparent, we have a big transparency on the decision rationale. We've got a document produced by the authority deciding on withdrawal, deciding of the withdrawal of the market, and therefore we see what are the risks and why is it appropriate to no longer have the drug on the market. And that's not given for withdrawals due to economic reasons. Of course, we've got the statement due to economic reasons, we withdraw the drug from the market, at least in the European procedure. This letter is sometimes published on the EMA website, but what are these economic reasons? I mean, the challenges in the practice are the same. We need to look for therapeutic alternatives. Sometimes they are available. Sometimes we know that they are available for the central indication, but not for minor indications. One example is interferon alpha, where the hairy cell leukemia will then be treated off-label with the pegylated interferons, which is at least a touchy business to have the off-label use as an alternative for formally authorized drug, but one can use that, to be honest. But we've also seen examples where the economic reason was simply, well, we want to repurpose the drug and have it back on the market for a higher price per milligram. And, well, we need to discuss, well, we as a society are really willing to accept that, giving that much leverage to the companies to simply say, well, we don't think that the drug is important for this indication. And even if it is, and therefore we supply it on a named patient basis, but what we really want is to place it on the market again in a different indication on a higher price, simply to, well, because we can. We are the ones who decide upon that, and you are either following us or not. And so, of course, prices are important in this business, but to be honest, as long as we as payers do not really know what the costs are, it's hard to believe that prices are too low for a certain drug. Because even, especially in the generics market, we are talking about a mass market, and mass markets tend to live from high volumes and not for high individual prices. And we also do not believe, and that's maybe contradictory to what Adrian already said, we do not believe that throwing more money on the one side of the market will lead to consequences on the other hand, therefore higher availability. We think that when we spend more money in a market, we also need to make sure that the money is used in a way we deem wisely and not only used for, let's say, other projects. And I'm happy to discuss all those points in the following.
Thank you, Michael. So as you said, yeah, money needs to be spent wisely. We as payers we only have one budget, and definitely sometimes you need to do the assessment where to spend your money wisely. So thank you for sharing your perspective. And now I would also like to introduce Matjaž Marks from the National Competent Authority. And Matjaž Marks is the head of Division for Pharmacoeconomics, HT and Market Monitoring in Slovenian Medicines and Medical Device Agency. And he's also a member of European Medicines Agency SPOC Working Party. Matjaž, I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the introduction, Momir. I'll try to add to the discussion by presenting the view of one of the smallest competent authorities within the EU, so Slovenia. I think I need to start at the beginning. Namely, smaller markets are facing the issue that some of the licensed for medicinal products never even enter the market or enter it with significant delay. This is true regardless of the authorization process. But still, despite this worrying fact, the overall trend seems positive. So the number of available products is increasing year on year, meaning that the number of new entrants is larger than the number of withdrawals. So why are we having a special session on withdrawals? Then they don't seem to be an issue. Well, the issue is that +1 is not the same as -1. So a new entrant cannot directly replace an existing product. The product that is being withdrawn from the market has an existing pool of patients that obviously benefit from its use, and also has an existing pool of prescribers that have long-term experience using it, so can use it in a very specific kind of patients or whatever, where they are very confident in using it. So the withdrawal is not probably in the interest of any of these two, but is being proposed by the marketing authorization holders. And this is most commonly because of commercial reasons. So the volume demand joined with the price achieved does not equal out, and the production of either of the active pharmaceutical ingredient or of the final product is commercially no longer viable. And yes, I think we can agree that in some cases the prices of well-established medicinal products are indeed very low, but I think this is not really today's discussion. So back to the topic. In our experience, the marketing authorization holders contact us when the decision to withdraw a product has already been taken and it's basically no longer negotiable. So all we can do is minimize the consequences to the public health, or try to minimize them. So medicines intended for use in pediatric patients, in orphan diseases, or in areas that are very difficult to treat or switch, like more chronic diseases or epilepsy, oncology, infections. These medicines are significantly more difficult to replace. And currently we have no tools available to make the marketing authorization holders stay on the market, unless they would, for whatever reason, change their mind. So in cases where we can find no alternatives, we are granting special import licenses, which is, of course, not ideal. Finding a suitable clinical replacement, informing prescribers, patients, and most importantly, the actual switching, they all take considerable amount of time, and the current notice period of 2 months suffices only in cases where there's an alternative already available. In all the other cases, this is not enough. So the prolongation of this notice period could represent the first solution. We've heard today already improving the communication between all the stakeholders is definitely an area where we can all improve. And there's also deployment of what could be called the stick and carrot approach. So with some carrots being an introduction of the electronic patient information leaflet, especially for the products used in hospitals, multilingual packaging, potentially setting a floor price for certain medicinal products, or modification of tendering rules to include more aspects than just the lowest price. On the other hand, the stick could be the introduction of obligatory publication of the regulatory dossier to make it available to potential other producers that would be interested in this medicine. But this, of course, takes significantly longer than 2 months. Well, to conclude in a way, by inclusion of withdrawals on this multi-stakeholder workshop, we are already in a way admitting that the withdrawals are an issue. So looking back, I see numerous similarities with the situation with shortages 5 to 10 years ago, which in the end led to EMA extended mandate regulation. Having in mind the general economic situation at the moment and the increasing energy costs, I fear that a number of low to medium volume, low-priced medicinal products and active pharmaceutical ingredients will be at least considered for withdrawal shortly. So I would therefore urge the colleagues in competent authorities across the EU and also, of course, all the other stakeholders to be more proactive this time around and start working on a more harmonized approach today rather than tomorrow. As together, obviously, we can achieve significantly more. This concludes my statement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matthias. Thank you, and also thank you for pointing out also your perspective. And as you said, competent authorities have no means at hand that would prevent a withdrawal if market authorization insisted it. And I would really like to thank all the presenters for this first part. We are perfectly on time, and I'm sure from your expert position, you could present this for a few sessions, you know. So, but as said, these were flash statements, and now we will move to the second part. We would really like to inform you about the network priorities to 2025, and I would like to ask João Ferreira and Michael Bernen to take the stage. So João Ferreira is a supply and availability of medicines and devices specialist, and he works at European Medicines Agency, and also is highly involved in the task force on availability of authorized medicines. And Michael Bergman is the head of scientific evidence generation department at the European Medicines Agency. And I would like to give floor to João, and if you can put the presentation on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Momir, and good morning, everyone. Also, thank you to the fellow speakers for the flash statements. They're very important indeed for us in order to understand what can the task force possibly do also in this particular area. So we go to the next slide, and this is basically a very quick outline on what we're going to be basically looking at in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So first, we're going to be very quickly recapping the current industry's reporting obligations, so the as-is obligations. Then we will move a second to a very high-level view on the impact on public health of withdrawals from the market. Some of these consequences have already been alluded today also by the other speakers, and also we will identify again what are the vulnerable patient groups. Then we will move to a bit of history and basically what has the task force been basically doing in the field of withdrawals from the market, and again what possibly could also the task force look at in the coming years in the context of the current mandate. We'll then pass to some of the solutions that are also available to regulators to mitigate the impact on withdrawals from the market before I pass finally the floor to my colleague Michael on the right to introduce three key topics for discussion and future action, which again are very important and critical to inform and refine the task force program in this topic. So we go now to some legal provisions and explain again what is the meaning of marketing cessation and what are the current obligations for pharmaceutical companies. So again, when we look into the particular meaning, we see that according to the general principles that are defined on the notice to applicants, this is defined as a cessation of release into the distribution chain with a particular consequence that the concerned product may no longer be available for the supply to patients. When we look into particularly into the wording or the legal provisions around reporting obligations that are defined under the EU law, Regulation 726/2004 does mandate companies to inform the agency in the case of centrally authorized products that are ceased to be placed on the market in a particular member state, either temporarily or permanently. And also Directive 2001 83 does state indeed that if the product is to be discontinued in a particular case, either again temporarily or permanently, the manufacturer shall notify the relevant national competent authority no less than 2 months before the marketing cessation. Now, a few speakers have already alluded in their statements as well to the benefits of prolonging the notice period. Again, indeed, that particular early notification deadline could be actually an advantage primarily for better readiness and case management and response. However, in today's presentation, at least in our presentation, we'll not be really focusing on that discussion, because this is something, again, as has been reiterated before, is being looked at by our Commission colleagues in the context of the EC pharmaceutical strategy for Europe, and again, considerations around new legislative measures for new obligations for industry are being looked at. So we go to the next one, and again, just to reiterate a couple of examples on impact to patients, and again, what are the vulnerable populations. So again, we have all discussed this, and this has been also broadly acknowledged by the two-day discussions. We know that problems with unavailability do have an impact on supply chains, but at the same time, they affect directly also healthcare systems, with a particular impact, obviously, to patients. So that is actually primarily the case when there are no or only very limited therapeutic alternatives. We had the basic presentation from Charlotte. Charlotte gave the example of 2 case studies, which are basic practical examples of many others that we could bring up today, where actually patients' health is impacted. In addition to that, we also have obviously healthcare professionals that may need to switch patients over to alternatives that may be either less efficacious or that may lead also to adverse reactions on medication errors. So this is something also that requires particularly also close monitoring. The third one is obviously also the aggravation of patients' health due to a delay of a critical treatment or as a result of a missing dose. And again, Mary also on her presentation, she also alluded to the example of side effects from not taking a medicine that causes dependence. That's the case of benzodiazepines. Also, it is expected, and it's very important, that also we exert some caution, and this is particularly important when manufacturers actually have to be vigilant about medical need and therapeutic indications. So if we are talking about vulnerable populations, that is the case in the case of discontinued medicines that are used primarily in patient groups that are suffering from life-threatening conditions or rare conditions, but also if the particular patient group affected is likely to also be a vulnerable population, that, like pediatric population, elderly population, or even mental health patient population, where we know that indeed marketing cessations, they do really have a serious risk when it comes to the health of those patient groups. So the next slide is just, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, just a bit of a history. So basically what has been developed by the task force in the field of withdrawals from the market since its inception in 2016. So again, a lot of the work that has been undertaken has been primarily in the context of work in the field of national regulatory authorities. So in 2019, the task force conducted the survey to national competent authorities on handling withdrawals from the market. So back then, the primary objective was mainly to try to gather some information on the processes that NCAs do have to handle withdrawals from the market. So this did apply for both human but also veterinary medicines at national level. The survey also looked into measures that are in place to mitigate or prevent withdrawals from the market from occurring, and in the next minute we will also be presenting some of these findings in our presentation. Currently, the work program of the task force has one particular action that's marked to build up also on that 2019 survey, and also pursue possibly the development across the regulatory network of best practices on managing withdrawals from the market. There's also already broad consensus across the network that also that 2019 report that was adopted by the task force already represents pretty much a fast summary of those management processes nationally. What we do not have, however, is on the industry front is published guidance for MAG. So contrary to the guidance that is in place since 2019 and has also been published in 2019 by the Task Force on Identification and Detection of Shortages by Pharmaceutical Companies, we do not have a guidance for industry on the field of withdrawals from the market. So it's very important today to again listen to the feedback from the various stakeholder groups, because that's actually what's going to help us also informing going forward basically the plans of the task force in this particular field. And it's also obviously important, as we also mentioned before, to also wait for the publication of the pharma law revision in the area also of withdrawals, and again wait to see how that could also inform in the future decision making on also possible guidance to industry in this area. So we basically already approaching the end. So we just wanted to also highlight to you anyway the toolkit of actions that are available to NCAs at both national level but also at centralized level to address the problems of withdrawals. So we also know from the discussions that we have at the level of the Spock Working Party with our NCA shortage experts that often authorities have no, let's say, legal mandate or power actually to make sure that companies keep the products on the market, primarily whenever we have actually company-driven decisions that are led by a commercial interest. So I also took note of the comment from Matthias that mentioned also whenever companies notify NCAs of particular withdrawal from the market, at that stage already companies have reached internal decisions. So it's very difficult also to make companies reconsidering that. So we think and we believe obviously that that's very important, that the need to have constructive dialogue between regulators and also companies is paramount to actually try to prevent withdrawals from the market. And this is primarily important in the case of medicines that have actually no or any adequate alternatives available. It's also important to mention, and this is actually something that the 2019 SEV report has shown to us, that in the event that products are withdrawn and that withdrawal is also linked to commercial reasons, in some cases companies may also continue to market the product until the expiry date. So this is something that we know that's a possibility, primarily to try to avoid market supply disruptions. And an additional important element, and this has also been mentioned by Lorraine yesterday, yes, regulators also do work together with clinical experts and also on guidance and protocols for therapeutic alternatives. And we also noted today Mary's proposal also on having and coming up with guidance on alternative available medicines that are that would be something also that actually could be helpful. So also a point well taken from our side. There's also the possibility to have regulatory flexibility, so also fast-tracking application procedures and shortening procedural timelines. Also, when marketing cessations cannot be prevented, also regulators very often they make use of other regulatory tools that are available. That's the case, for example, of the authorization of alternative products via the relevant licensing routes. And Tony also yesterday already mentioned some of these, let's say, toolkit flexibilities in the context of his presentation. An additional measure is also the fact that actually also regulators do reach out to alternative manufacturers or competitors, also trying to ask to increase production capacity and also meet additional demand. And another important element is also the fact that in case products are also withdrawn, there's also the possibility also for allow basically products to be supplied through the national permission scheme. So regulators obviously also do work with parallel importers to try to obtain and import and license medicine. So these were some of the, again, main conclusions from that 2019 survey report. I'll now pass the floor to Michael on my right, who's going to introduce the focus discussion on the focal areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joao, for the overview of the various activities, and also to the colleagues for providing the impulse statements earlier. I think it's fair to say that when it comes to the permanent withdrawals, with the focus of this particular discussion now, we are at earlier stages for the engagement. And I think this is really where I would also like to use the discussion that we're having here today, the opportunities. We can look at it from different perspectives, different angles, but really making best use of having so different stakeholders together around the table here is something which we would like to facilitate and really listen and hear. And I think the impulse statements we had at the beginning were already very telling in terms of different perspectives where people are coming from. So we are proposing to have the discussion around 3 different themes. The first one is around the initiatives before a decision has been made with regard to a withdrawal, a permanent withdrawal from the market. So the focus here is that a company-driven decision of withdrawals from the market should carefully consider the needs of patients to avoid having a negative impact on EU public health. So the question that we pose to the panel in a second is what actions can be undertaken to enable early dialogue before such decision is being taken. The second theme is around the transparency. So once a decision is being made, how does one cascade the information to the various colleagues in the healthcare systems that are directly affected? So improving transparency and enhancing communication routes is acknowledged between regulators, external stakeholders, organizations, including HCPs, industry, patient groups. What other tools can be explored to allow healthcare professionals and patients to obtain information early? And this I also came across already in previous talks, including the one from Mary. And the third area, which is really then going into an area that's also covered by Michael earlier, when it comes to the impact on the healthcare systems themselves and them to be prepared to deal with a withdrawal, is to say that the permanent marketing withdrawal of a medicine directly impacts delivery within a healthcare system, and therefore, what are the opportunities to engage early with the decision makers, such as in this case, the payers, in healthcare systems to discuss and assess the consequences of withdrawal from the market by a company. And that's the third area we will propose for the discussion today. And with these thoughts, and I guess it will stimulate a lot of thoughts also from the audience, I hand back to Momir for guiding us through the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I would also like to thank first to Joao and you for putting the network priorities into the context. And as you mentioned now, if you can put all these 3 questions back on the slide. So the main purpose is now to involve different stakeholders, and as we have many different stakeholders, I would maybe split those questions to different stakeholders, and I will start with the first question. And maybe it would be good, to be action oriented. What can we do to resolve this withdrawal? And the first question, I would like to invite Matthias and Adrian to say what actions can be undertaken to enable this early dialogue. And Matthias, first, if you can start, and then I will pass to Adrian. Bullet points.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see a real need for reinventing the wheel. In my opinion, open and rapid communication is key, and most importantly, does not require any specific legislative changes, because the current legislation says at least 2 months in advance, and this is way after the last batch has been produced, so at least the shortage will take place anyhow. And we know from either pharmaceutical or other experience that proper communication strategy can change the perception of any given issue dramatically. And in our case, I'm pretty sure that it would secure a timely and smooth transition. And I think we are all guilty parties here in a way. We can all do better in communicating. But still, I think the first initiative, the trigger has to be set by the marketing authorization holder. It cannot be done, I think, by anybody else. But once the process is triggered, then everybody can do better. Yeah. But of course, in a way, the standard response would be, yes, please stay on the market. This is simply because it's a common belief that having numerous active producers of medicines minimizes the risk of shortages versus dependency on a single producer. So the dialogue would then potentially even expand across multiple countries, member states, and would be long, and yes, would require significant more efforts and resources from everybody.
Matthias,
but to a significant benefit, of course, to the public health.
Yeah, Matthias, we have 3 questions, different stakeholders, so maybe really we should be very focused, action-oriented, and what can we do in a short-term perspective and in a long-term perspective. I would immediately go to Adrian. Adrian, can you share your perspective on this first question?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting issue, and I think there should be a mechanism. We've actually written a letter several months ago to the EU member state heads of government to ask them to put into place a system like this, because I agree with Mark, the future is not fantastic in terms of the risk of withdrawals because of the economic situation, because of certain commission regulation, which is in the pipeline, which will cost more than falsified medicines directive. And these are just facts. And so we need to find a way to manage this together with the member states. You know, we are collecting some data, and we can see, for example, for generic oncology medicines, okay, 50% of cancer patients rely on these. There are less than 3 suppliers per member state for 85% of those medicines. So imagine if one of those suppliers withdraws, you'll only have 2 or maybe 1. This is where we are. And I think, you know, we need to start talking about the facts. And I agree with Mark, we need to look at the carrots and the sticks, but we need a mechanism to enable this to happen. I think we also need to start looking at some of the hypocrisy of the discussions we're having here. We had the EMA present the survey, which showed that we should take special care, for example, of pediatric medicines. I agree 100%. But we also had a presentation from the payers who explained that they pay on the basis of API dose. Well, let me ask you the question, is the dose of API in a pediatric form higher or lower than the adult form in general? Of course, we know the answer, it's lower, which means the price is lower based on the payer formula. You know, how hypocritical is this, that on the one hand, we're saying you need to pay attention to commercial withdrawals for pediatrics, I agree. And on the other hand, we're paying a lower price, even though they're higher cost to produce and they're lower volumes. I mean, we need to start here talking about what's really going on. And we need a mechanism between the member state authorities and the industry to start discussing these issues and to start to fix them. Because otherwise the situation is unfortunately bleak.
Thank you, Adrian, and definitely we should explore the mechanisms. But on the other side, each product presentation is not of the same profitability, and I think we should explore and mitigate those issues in future. And then we go to the second questions, and I would maybe address this to question to Mary and Charlotte. So what other tools, as already stated, can be explored to allow HCP and patients to obtain information early on? So Mary, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm a fan of cascading information, which is easy to do now through IT means whereby either WhatsApp or emails cascade down to the prescribers within the national organization. I work in the NHS, so in that sense, it's easier in that there is one central body that then cascades information down to all practitioners who then pass it on to patients. But this system could be adapted by other states and other countries too that maybe don't have such a unified system. It still could be made with the virtues of IT to get this information out quickly and clearly in a reasonable communication that is easy to understand to all interested parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for saying that cascading, if it works for the NHS, which represents 1.3 million workforce, definitely we should also consider this cascading down in the system. And Charlotte, would you like also to present your view?
Yes, thank you. So as regards information and communication, so I already raised a point in my first presentation. That's obviously very important that this information is transparently published. But it's also very important that the concerned patient organization are informed as much in advance as possible. And are also included in the discussion between the competent authorities and the industry in order to evaluate and assess the impact of the withdrawal on patients' health and patient well-being, because both are obviously connected. For the moment, as I said, so in the best case situation, patients are informed at a very late stage, and very often they're not even informed of withdrawal. So we've got lots to do on that. I just wanted also to answer very briefly to the first question, which is also what can be done in advance. And we've heard Adrian speak also about the question of prices, and that's not the first time we hear that, which are too low. That's the reason why we have so many withdrawals. And we know, and I completely agree with what Lauren said before, how much the industry has been using the situation of antibiotic shortages in order to request price increases across the line. There is an alternative solution, because I'm not here to say that there are no issues with prices, but the solution is show your cost to the competent authorities with which you negotiate prices. So show the cost increases, because we know that for some medicines there can be issues, but it does not mean that we need a price increase across the board. So cost transparency is a solution. So there might be price increases on specific medicines which are in a risky situation. And we have this option in France. So you can go to the Ministry of Health in order to request a price increase because of the increase of production cost. So the solution is just transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, also for stating your opinion. And because of sake of time, I would go also to the third question. So just to discuss what are the opportunities to engage early with the decision maker in the health systems. And I would also give here the floor to Michael and Adrian. So Michael, the floor is yours.
To be honest, I think there is no easy answer to this question. With 27, I think, different health systems, and every health system having different regulations on prices, on how drugs are treated on the market, how medicines are supplied, who is buying in which direction. It's very, very complicated. And even when just looking at Germany, I would, from the start, I would say there are 4 different cases we need to look into, and that's only a very, very broad disruption where we can talk earlier. So it's hard. For us, and that's why I meant it's hard to know. We would at least need some transparency, and even if we have this transparency, or if we are felt that this transparency is given to us, it's not sure that we can react in a way that will have the company keep the drug on the market. And on the other hand, we still need to differentiate between real cost issues and cost issues that at least are partially made up. Let's just take the example of generic drugs. We've heard over and over again that price pressures are too heavy in whatever market you look at, and still we see companies entering tenders, giving high rebates to individual sickness funds. We still see companies, when we have external price groups, that give their drugs to the market at prices lower than these external reference prices. So for us, this means at least there is the possibility of supplying markets to the prices. And to be honest, sometimes we're a bit scared of the fact that we've got multi-million-dollar companies that then ask, well, us to save them from the contracts they entered, because we would simply assume that entering a contract and how do you enter a contract is one of the decisions that companies can do from themselves, and if they say that it's not feasible or not economically available to do so they should not enter a contract. So that's their decision, and I don't know how we can do more talking than we currently have.
Thank you, Michael, and I will pass the floor to Adrian to share his perspective.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with Michael. First of all, although there are different systems in Europe for the purchase of medicine or the reimbursement of medicine, they're all based on the same formula. So they're all based on some form of reference pricing, which establishes a single price across a range of competitors, usually off patent in this case, for the same molecule, let's say, sometimes even for therapeutic groups. And of course, if this price is set at a very, very low rate, you will see a decline in the number of suppliers. If that price would be increased, which doesn't happen in Europe, then you would see an increase in the number of suppliers. They have this model in Canada. It works very effectively. When there are too few suppliers, they increase the price, more suppliers enter the market. If there are too many suppliers, they decrease the price. Some suppliers exit the market. So you have a balancing mechanism. It works very well. The same with tenders. Again, I don't agree with Michael, because we've seen in Germany with some leaked information about some tenders, some price dumping going on in the German market, for example, where they're buying at 1 cent the product, which seems to me, an extraordinarily low price. Of course, that's a company that offered it, dumping for whatever reason. But what you can do is look at security of supply criteria in tenders. You can look at having multi-winner tenders. This has been successfully implemented in the UK, in Italy, in Denmark. Why not across the rest of Europe? So I think there are reforms that can be introduced. It's just that the payers don't want to introduce them. They're opposing it because they don't want to increase the price by even 1 cent.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Adrian. As you both mentioned, it's a multifactorial, a complex system, and pricing at this stage is still a national competency. We have 27 member states, and some of countries like Germany has 40,000 product presentations, and this is then very complex decision making if we go on a level of product presentations. But definitely we would need to find a dialogue between different stakeholders, how to make this possible. And we see latest improvements of price increases for certain medicines, so this can be discussed, but of course it needs to be very well balanced. Okay, then I think I would really like to thank all the presenters for sharing your views. And again, thank you for all inputs. We'll now open the floor for discussion. And we have 15 minutes left, so I see a chat question. So, Ange, would you like to take the floor, or you want me just to comment? So, you agree with Mary's points about cascading information? So, we don't hear you. Oh, we hear you. We hear you now. Yeah. So,
great,
yeah.
thank you. Apologies, technical challenges. Yep, so I really agree with all the points raised about transparency and communication, but I think we need to take into account the different communication needs of our audiences. So we're aware that, everyone will be aware that there are groups that are seldom heard, groups that may be disadvantaged when it comes to digital literacy, for example. So when we think about communication more broadly, we need to identify a range of means to reach those different audiences, but also make sure that we have indicators to measure impact, to ensure that those communications are heard and, where necessary, acted on. by the audiences we're trying to meet. And then the other point I wanted to make was in line with what Charlotte said. I think involving patient and healthcare professional groups early, where possible, is always going to be valuable. So there are processes for dialogue that aren't always formalized within the European Medicines Agency, but may be accessible via other pathways. And if you can approach these audiences and get their feedback early on in the processes, you might identify pain points in meeting the needs of those audiences and be able to act on them.
Thank you, Ange. And Ange comes from Alzheimer Europe, and I would also like to ask all other speakers that will ask questions, to introduce themselves and state questions. I got a signal from the room in Amsterdam that there are some raised hands, and I would now give the floor to the participants who are present in Amsterdam. Monica?
Thank you so much, Momir. So first we have Casper.
Thank you very much, and also thank you to EMA for outlining the guideline where again the possibility of doing parallel trade was highlighted, parallel import in cases of withdrawals. I think it gives, of course, also a reason for reflection. So one of the things we would highlight is probably that we have to take this case by case and understand what is the reason for the withdrawal. We do see a lot of cases where it doesn't seem to be purely economic, or we need to understand at least the economic reasons, because we can get the product in other countries at a lower price and actually do normal parallel import. And so I think we need a balanced discussion on why exactly these cases, maybe there are good reasons. We have to also acknowledge that sometimes it is part of the negotiations. One of the things we're happy with would be to see an extended notification period, because it allows us to apply for parallel import license while the notification is ongoing. As soon as a product is final withdrawal, we cannot get a parallel import license anymore. And we have seen just today, for example, in Poland, the ministry has informed that atenolol is no longer available from the marketing authorization holder, but only via parallel import, and outlining those parallel importers who are importing. So I think it's something, again, where we have to understand, and these are on market terms, meaning there must be other countries where the prices are lower, otherwise we couldn't do it. So also a question to the authorities and to the payers: do you go in and analyze when you get the withdrawals? Do you look across countries? What are they actually paying in other countries? And then finally, just a question to maybe to Adrian. For example, in Denmark, you have some of the lowest prices on generics in Europe, but you actually have free pricing. That means the price can go up, and it does go up from time to time in the pharmacy market. What is your reflection around free pricing models and actually the fact that leads to the lowest prices in Europe in many cases, and how come that we have relatively few shortages there while having very small prices? So maybe just for my clarification.
Thank you, Casper, for your intervention, and I would then immediately pass the floor to Adrian if you can address the question from Casper.
Thank you, Casper, for that question. So actually, most countries in Europe, continental Europe, do not have free pricing. Denmark also has regulated pricing. It just has a form of a tender system within its regulated pricing market. So the UK, which is no longer part of the EU, it has an actual free pricing market where the prices can go up and down. So I think that's the main issue. So I think the fact is that you can have a fluid and competitive market. We have no problem with that. You can have low prices. Obviously, as the generic industry, we are part of the plan is low prices. However, what we are confronted with is government policies which aim to decrease the price below what the market would normally set. I think this is where the challenge is. And that is, to a certain extent understandable. This is public money. You need to have some control over the public money. I understand that. But in Europe, it has been pushed too far. And this is why we see, in particular, for hard to make, lower volume, older medicines, a high risk situation of withdrawals and shortages, because these are more expensive to produce, they have lower volumes, and therefore are at higher risk. So I think this is really the challenge, and we need to have this discussion I know it's not for the European Commission because it's not in charge of pricing, but we can also have the discussion through the council, through other means. There's no reason why we can't do that, but we need to have this discussion to correct this anomaly. Otherwise, we will face supply issues in the future directly related to the pricing policies of the member states.
Thank you, Adrian. I see also we have more hands in the room, and this is the case. Usually people in present are more active. So Monica, I will give the floor back to you to ask.
Thank you, Momir. And next is Ansela.
Yes, thank you, Ansela from BEUC. So I would like to say that I fully support the comments made by Anje from Alzheimer Europe, and also the call from Charlotte to have a 12-month notification of withdrawals. This should happen across Europe, as it will give more room to competent authorities to find alternatives. And then in relation to the proposal that was made about early dialogues, they can be positive, but there has to be some transparency around it. And definitely companies should be transparent about production costs when they claim that medicines are no longer profitable and that the prices will need to go up.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that maybe the price discussion is important, but it's not the only solution that we can offer, So between different stakeholders, we need to see what is possible to do, to have less withdrawals from the market, especially if those medicines are standards of care. And I will give now back the floor to Monica to ask questions.
Thank you. And now we have Maria Lamas.
Yeah, thank you. I would like just to add a comment to what has been said about the need of expanding a notification time for a withdrawal. I would like to bring the attention to a point related with the withdrawal, and it's the marketing authorization transfer. Not always the product, the medicine is withdrawn from the market. Sometimes what we see is a transfer of the marketing authorization to another marketing authorization holder. And in our experience, I am the head of the Spanish Agency of Medicines and Medical Devices, by the way, sorry for not introducing myself. What we have seen in our experience is that this is a critical point, and we think that the marketing authorization holder, the previous one, has to be responsible on how this transition happens. Both have to ensure that there is a seamless transition and they can guarantee the continuity of the supply without disruptions during this process. And that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for pointing out seamless process like we have in the hospital, seamless care. I think seamless care with withdrawal should also be the future solution. Monica, do we have other hands raised in the room?
Yes, we do. We have Per next.
So Per Trenk from IQVIA, and as I said, I am a little the numbers guy here. We talked a little about carrots and sticks to people. Marca said that in France, this with sanction actually works quite well. We have though a case in Netherlands where we implemented sanctions for slow reporting of potential shortages. The effect was actually a very large reduction of number of items on the market. At least between 2019 and 2021, it went down with about 5% the number of registered drugs. And people, as we understand, withdraw the product because the risk to have to pay the sanction didn't motivate to have the product on the market. It might not happen in other parts, and it might be just how they have interpreted how the sanctions would work. I also would agree with her that there is no reason to increase the price on every product, and I would suggest that there is then an artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithm used to try to identify which products are the risk. They typically have low volume, they have a low relative price versus other market, and they have few suppliers in the market. I did it manually on Sweden recently, and I could easily identify a set of characteristic that predicted at least 50% risk that they in a given year would have a shortage. I think we should work with the few products, the 1% of products in the market that has the highest risk, and find the ways. And the way might be an increased price, but I'm promoted before a European or a Nordic or a multi-country pack here. That's a long-term, more sustainable thing to keep those products on the market. And you have your e-pill project here. It certainly should use the electronic packet insert, so we have the biggest flexibility we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica, just to signal it, because we're coming to the end of our discussion, how many hands we have still raised?
2 more.
Okay, then let's address those 2, please.
Thank you. So first is Charlotte and then Darren.
I just wanted to come back on the issue of so passing over the market authorization to a new producer, because I believe that it is what happens in most cases, and that's obviously the solution, the best solution, at least for patients, so to keep the product on the market. So patients don't care who is a producer; they care about whether the product remains on the market or not. And I completely support Maria saying that it needs to be a seamless. So there needs to be a complete continuation with no interruption, and that industry has a responsibility in that. I just wanted to come back on the example of josamicin that I mentioned earlier. So we've been informed that the product will be withdrawn from the market because the only producer of the API has stopped the production. But still, before knowing that, there were 3 companies interested in taking over the production, which means that even for the old medicines, which have a very low price, very often there are still other companies interested in taking over. So that's what we need to aim at. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. And I think we can address last question before we wrap up.
Darren, please.
Thanks for the last opportunity, I guess. Well, I just wanted to point out that whilst the discussion on prices and things like that's valuable to have, in terms of one of the questions that was actually presented on the slide in terms of what we can do, I just go back to the concept of the early notification. There's nothing stopping anyone at this point in time engaging with the regulatory framework or even with the price payers early. And just to illustrate, we had early engagement with a company who wanted to withdraw 13 products, 12 of which they reversed based on a lot of interaction with us. And for unlucky number 13, we had enough time to, with the integrated health system approach, to be able to look at alternatives so that the hospitals were set up ready to go when that product did disappear. So there's nothing new there, it's just communication.
Thank you, Darren, for your comment. And I would now like really to thank for the session. I'll maybe just to wrap up, give me like 2 minutes, and we discuss various perspectives, various insights were given. And if I wrap up, early dialogue should be undertaken before industry decisions. And we should definitely consider the needs of patients to avoid having a negative impact on public health. And a proposed solution is to start dialogue 6 to 12 months before actual withdrawal happens, and at least for those medicines without other therapeutic alternative, to ensure this smooth transition of patients to a new therapy. And I think we should also enable regulators to facilitate transfer of marketing authorization, like Maria said, to have this seamless process. And other tools that were mentioned during the sessions, to allow HCPs and patients to obtain this information about withdrawals early on. So definitely they would like to have this earlier notification and to have this publicly available. And we discussed also about the guidance for HCPs on therapeutic alternatives. And we also discussed how to avoid impact on the delivery of healthcare in the respective healthcare system. And of course, about the opportunities for companies to engage early on with the decision makers. This should be further explored. And we discussed regulatory simplifications and flexibilities, so multilingual packaging, authorization of alternative products via different procedures, either this is repeated use procedures and mutual recognition, transfer of marketing authorization, and of course, possibility of shortened procedural timelines. And we discussed price increases for those critical generic medicinal products with some really specific product presentations. And we also discussed EU guidance on medicines procurement, so multi-winner tender and also criteria beyond the price. And if I can just wrap up, I think only together we can decide that all can be done. And with this, I would like to give back floor to my co-chairs, to Monica and Hughes, and I would like to thank you for the participation.
Thank you very much, Momir. And now I would like to invite everyone in the room for the lunch break, which is going to be served outside. And everyone online, please do come back sharp at 2 o'clock when we will start with session 5 on communication and transparency. But before that, if we can please give a round of applause to the current presenters and the moderators for excellent job.